Welcome back. We're the Book Mavens. I'm Amanda, she's Rachel, and this week we are reviewing the first book of the DAEVABAD trilogy, City of Brass, by S.A. Chakraborty. I think that's how you pronounce it. We're going to call her S.A. You need to read it. It's hard to describe, but...
It's very complex. There's a lot of characters. There are just some fabulous Arabian Nights vibe to this. We have a djinn. We've got a girl in trouble who has some magical abilities. We have a mystical city with all kinds of political intrigue happening, betrayals.
Long histories of conflict.
Yes, prejudice. There's all kinds of stuff happening in this book. Death, violence.
Magic.
And it's done really, really well. We really liked it, but it is very, very hard to sum up.
Yeah. Girl struggles, doesn't know anything about her backstory, gets taken to the mythical realm, begins to learn more about her backstory. Complications and intrigue arise.
A little tinge of romance in there.
Just a tinge, though.
Falls in love with her djinn.
Which is a genie-like character,
Yeah.
we should say. Okay, there's no way for us to not start spoiling stuff to talk about this because it's so complicated in the sense of like...
Complicated. It's a great adventure story. There are lots of characters, and it's a wild ride, I think. I mean, it's good, and this is the first of a trilogy, like we said. So we will be talking about the next two as we get to them. It will be spaced out since we're reading these with a book club.
Yeah, so yeah, unlike our traditional do them all together, you'll have to wait for the next installment of this until the end of the month. Yeah. But if you are planning to read it, which we highly recommend that you should pause here because we're about to start talking about characters and plot lines and questions that we have. The narrative jumps back and forth between two main characters, and so you're in their stories both simultaneously, and there's a little bit of time like you'll jump back to the... So it's hard to not spoil as the book progresses because you're moving through two different storylines. So this would be where you would pause if you want to read it and come back later. I have no idea who I'm rooting for in this book because...
I don't know if it's really where you're rooting for anyone kind of story. I mean, I think it's for our main character because she's...
Right, but there's no clear good or bad. In a traditional story, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy. You're trying to get the good guy to overcome whatever the bad, not even necessarily the bad guy.
There's not a big baddie.
Right, like whatever the bad thing that they have to conquer is. Sometimes when you read a book, you feel like you know stuff before the main character, and you're like watching as they try to catch up.
No.
Sometimes you feel like you've been thrown in way far into a story, and you're several steps behind trying to like figure out what's happening. That's this book.
Well, except for our main characters, like our main perspectives, I feel like we're just buckled up right alongside them because we have two perspectives. We have Ollie and, how do you pronounce it? Nari. And our main characters, and they're just as clueless as you are as a reader, I think, so you're learning things alongside them, and it's shocking. But all of the other characters know far more.
And they won't tell. And
they won't. It's
They keep saying things like, well, I'll tell you that later. Or like, I'm like, listen, tell me now. I'm so... But you're talking about like thousands of years of history. Like, I mean...
There's a lot of political history.
Dada's 14 centuries old.
Well, we got to explain who Dada is.
Okay.
Dada's the djinn.
We start with Nari. Nari is... grew up an orphan in Cairo. She has these abilities related to healing, but she doesn't really know where they come from or honestly really understand them, but she uses them to survive. She basically she's a snake oil salesman. Well, in part, like she puts on a good show
for religious healings. Like she does like exorcisms.
Yeah.
But she can, to me, she's like a diagnostician.
Yeah, diagnostician.
More than anything. So she can kind of like read somebody's body and be able to see what's going on with them. And it might be things that you can't fix. Somebody dying of some kind of wasting disease, right? Because that's what she's with that really rich guy in the beginning. And like, or if somebody has cancer, like she can detect those things which is kind of
But
cool.
she doesn't really know what to do about them per se.
No, she's been working with a
Pharmacist.
Yeah. And so I think the goal, right, is that she's trying to make enough money through all of her shady business dealings to be able to go to school. Isn't that what she's trying to do? She wants to be a healer.
So she tries to perform this exorcism on a child and ends up accidentally calling down the Ifrit, or awakening the Ifrit. I don't know how you want to look at it, but the Ifrit are the real... Ooh, you find out what they are later, but basically it wants to kill her. And
they're like demons.
Yeah, they're like a demon. She accidentally calls a Deva warrior who, interestingly enough, okay, I listened to the audiobook and read it, and it's spelled in the book D-A-R-A.
Like Dara.
Dara. But it is very clearly pronounced in the audiobook as Dada.
Which is weird.
Right.
It's
So,
just for
but
us
you know,
English speakers, like it just...
Right.
Yeah.
I decided to trust the audiobook because she would have, I mean, obviously that was
yeah.
done together. So in my mind, he's Dada. So she calls forth Dada, who is this ancient warrior.
Doesn't mean to.
She doesn't mean to, and boy, is he upset about it. And she, you know.
Well, we didn't talk about her other gift. She does have another gift. She can understand all languages and
Mm-hmm.
speak all languages, except for one, but we don't find out about that till later. But the...
Threads, guys.
Mhm.
Everything's threads. So then her and Dada, they're escaping the Ifrit and trying to get to DAEVABAD, which is the mythical city of brass. Okay, so that's how she gets from like human world to mythical world.
But on that journey, and they're for
Yeah.
like a month, she's learning about her family and who she is, that she comes from this line of healers who were supposed to have died out. So where she has come from, somewhat of a mystery at that
She's
point.
the last Nahid. So Nahid is like the healer tribe.
So they're chosen. So we have a chosen one trope.
Yeah. And Dada is Afshin, which is the tribe that served the Nahid. Like, so he would,
So that's why he came.
he's
to her
14
aid.
centuries old. Like, he served her family a long time ago.
But he has his own very complex history that you get little snatches of it, but I still think we don't really know the full story about that.
You keep reading and you're reading and you are in it. And you are like, I want to know what happens. And at one point you're
They
like,
tease it out.
yeah, I'm rooting for this person. And then you're like, shoot, no, maybe I'm rooting for this person. And then you're like, well, dang, I don't actually know what I want to happen here, but I want something to happen, but I don't know what it is.
There's all of this tribal conflict, and because you also have the Shafit,
Uh-huh.
which are a mixed blood, so they're half human and half
Deva.
So there's prejudice against this group of people, and you have the, how do you pronounce it? The Ashvin, or the Devas.
So the Devas.
And they don't believe in mixing with humans. That they're
Right.
like more of like a pure blood kind of deal. And then
Right.
you have the ruling family,
The Katani.
which are different. So you have like
Wait, is
three
that right?
different groups. It's very complicated.
Gaziri is the ruling tribe. I'm sorry. I was just sitting on my notes.
And they were not the chosen ones.
Y'all, I made a lot of notes.
Yeah. There's a lot of names. And so you're finding out about all of these very complex, hundreds of year old,
and there's
political.
There's so much tension.
Yeah.
So the
situations
ruling
going on.
family, the Gaziri, they took over DAEVABAD. DAEVABAD was built by
Which is the city of brass.
City of Brass.
Yeah.
It was built by the Devas. It was their city, and it was run by the
Albus keeps sitting on the
Nahid Council, right? So Nari's ancestors. It was run by their council, and they were persecuting the Shafit. And so the Gaziri royal family, when they took over the city, they were there to protect the Shafit. And the Devas were like put in place by Solomon's seal, which is like this artifact that the ruling family possesses that basically allows them to control the magical, like the Devas, the magic. They have magic.
like fire magic.
Fire magic. And healing, because the Nari.
Yeah, but it's just the Nari line.
Right.
They're not. They don't represent all the Devas.
So they believe that they
They're
took over the
shapeshifters.
city.
There's all kinds of things going on.
Such a good book.
Yeah.
They took over the city and now live in harmony. But they like they had this almost like kind of like righteousness, like we were here to protect the Shafi, but now they basically oppress the Shafi too, and just in a different way. Like, you're right, they're not like killing them, but they're not legally allowed to have jobs. They're not allowed to leave. Like, they're oppressed in every
they're
other
stealing their children.
Yeah, they're stealing their children. They're like, they're oppressed in every other possible way. So then you're like, well, because first you're like, okay, yeah, protecting this oppressed group, and then you're like reading and you're watching, you're like, no, this is.
But the Devas are also there, and they have their own area of the city that's cleaner. Like, they're better treated than this Shafi,
because they're so prejudiced against the Shafi too.
But they're not allowed to have any real political power.
Right.
One is an advisor to the king, but that's, I think, as high up as
that's it.
They'd go.
So
they're not allowed to seize any kind of political power.
Almost like a governor, a figurehead. He's the one who speaks for the Devas a lot of times with the king, and then communicates things back and forth. And so then you Nari just gets like dropped in the middle of this.
Yeah, they get there, they have no idea what's going on. There's a planned uprising that's purposeful and another way to try and control the Shafit. And then so Dada gets there, and he kind of shuts down this entire plan that they had going on, and then she gets recognized as being
the daughter of Maniza,
who was the
kind of the last known. Her and her brother were like the last Nahids who had survived and had a personal relationship. Like, they lived in DAEVABAD with this family, with the Gaziri king and his family, and like ran a healing clinic, and like were very well respected. Like, he had a special relationship with,
we don't know quite what it was,
but you don't know what it was, but he favored her. Like, you're gonna learn a twist later, but like, he respected her above all others, and he treats her different than he has treated any other Deva, right? Like, there's something unique about her, but she's also this kind of big mystery too. So then, Nari comes in, and she's like,
well, he immediately recognizes her. She must look just like what he assumes is her mother. But then where has she been? And because Nari doesn't remember anything about herself.
Right.
I mean, nothing.
She's been raised by humans.
She's like Aladdin.
And then, but here's the thing.
Well,
the king, he's a piece of work. He just announces that she's purebreded, and she's the daughter of Maniza. The end. And like, his word is unquestioned. Blah, blah, blah. And he is a...
He does this to give her this position of respect, but it's really just a way to control her, because she can become a symbol for an uprising with the Deva. So there's all kinds of stuff going on.
And he forces her into that role as like a symbol, and like forces her to do a lot of
things. But wants her to
things.
fail, because she doesn't know how to use her abilities yet. And so she gets
he wants to use her to make money.
A teacher, so a woman who used to work with her mother,
Nazreen.
Yeah, and so she's really pushing her, and so that was one of your favorite scenes, you said.
One of my favorite scenes is where she finally just like explodes. It's like she basically can't take the pressure anymore. She accidentally, and in an effort to try to like stop a man from dying, and not to heal him, like he's going to die, she's basically trying to perform this
just long enough for him to say goodbye to his family.
Very delicate procedure that would buy him time for his wife to get there. She's coming from across the city, and it goes very badly because she's never done it before. She's never seen it done before, and she feels like Nazreen is like, she basically has it out with her, and is like, I should not have touched a human until I had done this like 100 times in practice. I should not, she's like, I should not have been allowed to touch a single patient for a long time. I've been here 2 weeks, and you're asking me to do this, and you keep telling me like, oh, my intentions, and you keep lecturing me about, the faith of my mother that I never knew, and like, she basically just explodes at her, and then Nazreen explodes back, which is, it's just a great scene between the two of them, and there's no resolution, because then she immediately gets called to help Ali, who's been somebody tried to kill him.
There's a lot going on too. I mean, there was another procedure she was doing, like something with
there's like
a tube, and somebody's
and salamander had gotten this woman's body, and she's like,
but it's like a mythical thing. It's not like a real thing. Anyway, but so she takes it upon herself, and I do like that. Remember, so she's decided she's going to train herself, and so she's been doing all of this stuff kind of behind the scenes to
she
learn
wants
these
to be
skills.
A healer. She wants to learn, which is kind of how her and Ali. So the king has 2 sons,
So
Muntadir,
Ollie's our other perspective that we get.
yeah, Muntadir is the older brother. He's the heir. He's the emir. And then Ali is training to be Kuid.
Kaid?
Kaid. I think that's it. Anyway, basically like the head of the military, like the number 2 in command.
But he's like really good apparently, like with the special weapon that they have.
Zulfar.
Yeah, that
Zulfar.
his family, his tribe
tribe
can
does.
power, except Dada does.
It lights on fire.
Because Dada's awesome.
Yo, listen, Dada's got depths Dada's got.
Dada was imprisoned by the Ishrit, right? Or he was used by them.
He was enslaved.
And he doesn't remember everything that he did because he had all of these owners as a jinn. And he doesn't quite know what happens. But Nari gets glimpses of his past.
It's such a it is so
very interesting.
And
but he has a history with the ruling family. He's known as the Scourge. So we're talking about things that happened hundreds of years ago between these two families or two tribes, I should say families, tribes of people, and where he murdered a whole bunch of people on the orders of Nari's
family.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't know why. Like he says at one point, he's like, I was exiled from my own city for following orders. And while he was exiled, his family was brutally murdered within the city. And so like he's the definition of a haunted character. Like he's got so many layers and so many secrets.
But you don't get very much of him after they get to the city, I feel like, because he goes away and then you get different scenes with him and Nari because they do have a moment when they're traveling there. He definitely cares about her. She actually proposes to him at one point and he says no because he's like, you are the last. You have to have children. And he can't because he's not 10. And this is the thing. Yeah, we don't know everything about how you make a djinn. Like, yeah, it's weird.
He's
connected to this ring. Becomes important.
He's not alive, but he's definitely not dead either. He's like,
don't know.
We're hoping that, and I still don't know. I mean, at the end they leave it like he's dead, but and then at the end,
the ring. He has the ring. There's big reveals.
Right. Listen, there's so much happening, and then right at the end, the whole story just goes whoop.
Yeah,
and you're like,
what is happening?
We even checked with our rest of our book club. We're like, can we go ahead and start singing? And they're like, no, and we're like, okay, fine. We're being respectful, but let me tell you, it is work.
It was really hard to not just want to pick it up because it does end. It's one of those books you just want to pick up the next one because there's so many unanswered questions. And there's some really crazy stuff that happens at the end of this book that you just don't see coming. It's not predictable. I couldn't predict anything in this book.
I have honestly, I mean, you could guess that some of the conflicts between these groups are going to continue, but I have no idea.
The actions and who people are and
who's going to do what, like, I got nothing.
And then you're finding out that these people maybe have abilities or they're connected to these other tribes and they've kept it all secret. You just don't know. We don't know anything. So City of Brass was a great opener for this. So
I cannot believe, because she wrote
there's no resolution.
There's a little excerpt from the author in the end of the book, and it basically talks about how like she started this as a project she thought no one would ever see, and I was like, can you imagine if you were S.A.'s friend and she says, hey, do you want to read this thing I've been working on? And you start reading it and you're like, I'm sorry, what? Excuse me? Like, you read this for fun? Oh
yeah, but gosh, you know what?
Her brain.
Diana Gabaldon did that as well. Outlander was just an experiment.
I'm telling you, I can't understand.
A writing exercise.
Some people's brains just, it's amazing. Because you know she's got this all up. All of these, it's like pulling threads. The whole book, you pull one tiny little thread and you think you're unraveling the mystery, and like you pull on other threads, and then like, it was such a great read.
Yeah, we recommend this one. We recommend that you pick this up. It's very involved, but it's very readable. It goes. I read this very fast. I think I finished this in under 3 days. So, yeah, I did speed through this one.
There are parts where I kind of got confused in the sense of, one, And we had the same. I had a similar problem in Unravel the Dusk, and that duo.
Spin the Dawn and Unravel the Dusk.
Spin the Stars duo. What is it called?
The Blood of Stars.
Blood of Stars. The Blood of Stars duo. Because I think I mentioned this because I'm reading a nonfiction on Japanese history. I'm not as familiar with the names, so I have to process longer because I'm not familiar with the language. It's kind of similar here at first because a lot of them are Arabic terms or Arabic roots, and I'm not super familiar with that. So there are parts, like, especially when you're getting a lot of information about like the tribe's different histories at once, I was like, wait, hold up.
What's happening?
Just keep going because she loops it back in so that you can pick it all up. Like she keeps picking up those pieces so that even though you get only little tiny pieces of information at a time, you don't lose it. Which I think is very masterfully done on her part.
Fonda Lee does that with the Jade City ones as well, which is another Asian fantasy story, urban fantasy, and she does it as well. There's a lot of names, and us as Americans over here speaking English and just not used to the terminology. I mean, it takes you a little bit to get into it because it is a different
And you
world.
meet so many. I think some of it too has to do with the narrative style because like she drops you right in the middle of the story, and like. Because Nari she just gets shoved into this, like, the mystical world. You're exposed to all of it at once, just like she is, which, twofold. You understand Nari, how she's so, like, confused and why she makes a lot of choices she makes. She's trying to survive, right? But she's, like, being overloaded with information as well, just like you are. So it helps you understand Nari's perspective at the same time as introducing you to this whole other world. It just like drops you in the middle of it. And it's so good. It's so good.
It is good.
I mean, there's mythical beasts, I'm telling you, and then Ollie, the characters are so realistic because they have characteristics and you're like, okay, yeah, I see really great potential. And then they also do stuff that you're like, wait a minute, hold on a second, like,
well, it really gets into people's intentions. Your intentions could be so good, but the repercussions of following through on what you intended can have these really long-lasting effects. And you really see that between Ollie and his brother, where his brother is constantly watching out for Ollie, and Ollie makes some really bad
decisions.
Calls. Yeah, and
he
has his heart in the right place. Like he's trying to help people, but he doesn't have enough information, I think, or enough knowledge to really know what he's doing. And he ends up making a lot of things worse. And he's an interesting character. And his relationship with Nari is is cool because there's this whole arranged marriage.
They want Nari to marry Moon Kadir, the older brother.
Yeah. So they're trying.
But his dad says, Ollie, go make friends with her so that she'll be more open to your brother. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, do it.
But he does. And they form this friendship. And they do, I think, genuinely care about each other as friends. And it's just fascinating.
He teaches her to read.
Yeah.
And my economist heart. He asks her, he's like, well, what do you want to read about? And she's like, I want to know how the markets work here. And he goes, economics? Did somebody tell you to say that to me? And she's like,
really
no. And he's like,
he's very quiet and he's really religious and almost fanatical to a degree. So I'm hoping that they'll develop more in terms of what that means in terms of his decision making.
I feel like
going to change.
It's kind of also a cautionary tale, but everybody's keeping secrets from everybody. And so on the one hand, you spend a lot of the book just really frustrated. You're like, just tell me. But that's what keeps you reading. We haven't really talked about Moon Kadir at all. He's cast as this like Playboy prince.
No, but he knows what's going on.
He's very savvy.
He has this long-standing mistress, but we think it's all a front. He's got a romantic relationship going on with Jamshid.
See, and we read this different. She read it as there's definitely a romantic relationship. I read it a little bit more unrequited on Jamshid's part. Like that they're best friends and like Jamshid's in love with him, but like also the thing. So I'm interested to see. I could see it either way, but like when we were first talking about it,
I think for sure
I had read it a little bit more unrequited. Why can I not say that word today?
I think it's an established relationship, and why he has had this long-standing mistress that it's all just a front. That's why.
have to say, I'm so impressed with him. Like, he's so much more politically savvy than you think. Like, every time, he's just so much deeper than the way he portrays. But I think that's part of I think it's in part because that's how he lets people underestimate him. And then he isn't an idiot. Like, it's not even an idiot. He's not as shallow as people think he is. Oh, we didn't talk about The Secret.
Which one?
Oh, good point. The one where, okay, so Ali in the very beginning of the book gets in trouble. He is found to have been secretly helping this like Shafit resistance group, basically. And Ali, well-intentioned, thought he was funding things like, medical care. Well, we talked
about how he wants to make a difference in a good way, and he's just very misguided.
Right. And it ends up that they were using the money to arm themselves. In part, anyway. Like, I think they were doing the other things, too.
Sure.
Anyway, so Munkadir, in an effort to, like, show his brother that there's more to the royal family, like, that there's a lot more at play, takes him to this, like, underground lair, this, like, hidden secret cave, where they have basically entombed every single Nahid, minus Meniza. Which is, like, super against the religious beliefs of this tribe. It is, like, even Ali, he's just absolutely gobsmacked. He's like, they would destroy the city if they knew this was here. Like, he's like, and that's why we didn't. Because he's like, it's not his family that did it. This is, like, generations that have been perpetuating this. Like, gathering their bodies as they die and putting them entombing them here instead of burning them, which is what their religious beliefs require. And then, other than Meniza, who he had burned in the Grand Temple, which is their big religious, like, that's the central religious location for the Deva in the book. Because she's special to the king. And you don't really know why he respects her so much. There's clearly history and story there, but you don't know what it is. And then there's this tease that she's actually secretly alive and that her death was not real or staged or something. Like, you don't really know more. But then, like, his family has been keeping them under the city.
Maybe they could be brought back in some way. We don't know.
I don't know where that's going. But for Ali, it's like this realization moment that, like, his family, a lot of the decisions that were made many years ago. And so the rulers decide how they're going to keep balance and those kind of things. And, like, it's basically meant to get him back on his family's side. And it does to a lot of extent because he realizes that his father is trying to navigate the very delicate, I hate to say peace because it isn't, but, like, calm or balance between these.
And also to keep themselves in power.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it is, we want
the balance of power and basically keeping things from just all out.
But there's things with Ali's mother as well. There's some things going on with that, some kind of weird water magic thing going on. We don't know enough.
Yeah. Ali knows how to swim and likes to swim, which is seen as this weird behavior. But in his mother's tribe, it is like it's the only thing his mother ever gave him because he was raised at the Citadel, which is like the military school. He was raised to be a soldier because that's what the
second son would do.
Yeah, the Qaid? Sure. That's what he does. You're basically like the head of the military. You work for the Emir, so his brother, but you're in charge of like the military forces. And so he's been trained as a soldier his whole life. And the only time he ever really remembers his mother once he left her harem, once he left her, is she showed up at the Citadel and threw him in a pool and basically made him learn how to swim. And it cost her. She was never allowed to see him or her sister again.
His sister, yeah.
Him and Munkadir are half siblings.
Yeah. And then he has a sister, and
she's
not very much. She's not very nice.
I think she's going to be important later, but I don't.
She could be, but right now she's not very nice.
Right now she's not nice.
Very much looking forward to the next one, Kingdom of Copper,
and
then Empire of Gold is the third one. So,
who do we recommend this book for?
Anyone.
Yeah, I'd recommend this for anyone.
I mean, I think that there's enough going on. There's enough character development for people who are really into character-driven stories. I think it has a tremendously complex plot. So people who are more plot-driven, it's in there. Interesting magic system. I feel like we're still learning about it. So a lot more to develop with that. So people, you know, it's for fantasy readers, but I also think that that the magic isn't so in your face that if you aren't one that really likes a lot of magic, that it's that it could be for you too. Any kind of history, if you're interested in Middle Eastern history, Egyptian history, since it does start in Cairo, like I would say pick it up. It's a lot of fun.
I think if I had not been introduced to fantasy in another format, Robin Hobb, which her code's on the side, guys.
Yeah, it's recommended.
Recommended by Robin Hobb. I think this is a fantastic intro to fantasy. If you have friends who are like me, into mysteries and the occasional thriller and are very plot driven, like who love the political intrigue, this would be a great intro fantasy book. Like a crossover for those friends that you have that maybe are not not super into fantasy or don't. Like, this could be a great. I think, this is a great book cover read too. There's so many things to talk about and like.
There are just trying to figure out people's intentions and things. Yeah, where it's gonna go. Very, very cool. I wouldn't recommend this to like super YA. I would think probably at least 17. 18. It's not that it's about the violence, it's just about the complexity of the plot. This is not like a coming of age YA story or anything like that. It is pretty violent, but nothing out of the realm.
It's not particularly graphic.
Yeah, no. It's definitely a plot driven story.
Yeah. So next week we're going to be talking about Alex E. Harrow's The Once and Future Witches, which we read as Spindle Splintered when we let the decision wheel decide for us. One of her kind of a short novella, if you will. This is a standalone book, so it's not part of a series, which I think I'm looking forward to seeing a kind of her longer prose to see how she carries the narrative in a traditional novel format. But we'll be reading this next week. So if you've read it, tell us in the comments what you think. If you've read City of Brass, let us know in the comments. We know from our last video there are a couple of you out here who are also reading it or preparing to read it. Let us know what you think. Would you recommend this to your book club? Would you recommend it to your friends? Let us know. And then like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye.